In the March of 1980, a letter arrived at Paramount Studios' Gulf and Western Plaza from California, addressed to the filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola. It had been written by Jo Ellen Missakian, a librarian at Fresno's Lone Star Elementary School, detailing her pupils' enthusiasm for their favourite novel, S. E. Hinton's The Outsiders, and their wish to see a film adaptation made of it. Also enclosed was a petition, signed by 110 of the children, and a copy of the novel itself. Unexpectedly, some 3 months later, the school received a reply from the director's producer, Fred Roos, explaining that Coppola would read the book and get back to them about it. In the months that followed, Roos continued to correspond with Missakian about the progress of the project, and, almost exactly 3 years after she had first written to the director, Francis Ford Coppola's production of The Outsiders was released across the United States, its cast of up-and-coming young actors helping to initiate the Brat Pack phenomenon which followed soon afterwards. Coppola had been one of the darlings of the American cinema of the 1970s, with his extraordinary run of critical and commercial successes, the Godfather films, The Conversation and Apocalypse Now. But by the early 1980s, both he and his production company, Zoetrope Studios, were facing bankruptcy. His musical project, One from the Heart, had grown from a small $2 million picture to a lavish spectacular costing over 10 times that amount, and its dismal box office returns had put him on the brink of financial insolvency. What had prompted The Outsiders, then, was the need for a commercial hit, but so too did it prove to be a means to another end. After reading the novel, he had been drawn to another of Hinton's books, Rumblefish, published some 8 years after her more famous debut, and one on a subject much closer to the director's heart. Its story, centred on the young Rusty James and his idolisation of his older brother, the motorcycle boy, in many ways mirrored his own youth, in the shadow of his own older sibling, August Coppola. While a bout of polio had rendered the young Francis a sickly child, and achieving only mediocre grades at school, August had been the gifted one, going on to earn a doctorate and eventually a professorship in comparative literature in the early 1960s. Francis remained in thrall to his brother's intellect, even after he had achieved his own fame and fortune, and Rumblefish's closing dedication makes clear both the love and gratitude which he had had for him. Family was, of course, a major theme in his Godfather films, but while Francis's dynamic with his more esteemed brother might be seen to be reflected in Fredo and Michael's story in The Godfather Part 2, Rumblefish would be the first of Coppola's more personal works dealing with his own relationships more explicitly, a theme which he has continued to develop and refine in some of his more recent films. The casting of Rumblefish would be a family affair too. Having used his sister Talia as an actress and his father Carmine as a composer in The Godfather, in Rumblefish it would be the turn of his daughter Sophia to appear on screen, as well as his nephew Nicholas, August's son, who chose for this film to take the stage name Cage in order to avoid charges of nepotism on his uncle's part. Work on the adaptation of Rumblefish began during the shoot of The Outsiders, with Hinton and Coppola working on the script on their days off. Despite commencing in Tulsa days after the end of that film's production, with some of its cast and largely the same group of technicians, the director wanted the film to be as aesthetically distinct from the former film as possible. Bright, saturated colours and naturalistic framing, replaced by a stylised, high-contrast black and white palette, and distorted, wide-angle compositions. For visual inspiration, Coppola and production designer Dean Tavoularis would look to earlier film history. The German expressionism of the 1920s would be a key touchstone, in particular the nightmare-like claustrophobia of Robert Wiener's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, while Emil Jannings's expressive performance in F. W. Murnau's The Last Laugh was shown to the cast in order to illustrate how they were to physically embody their characters. Closer to home, another visual reference point would be West Side Story. As with Walter Hill's The Warriors, Rumblefish featured highly stylised fight scenes, here choreographed by ballet dancer and director Michael Smooin. The film's prominent and repeated clock imagery was a nod to the expressionist master Fritz Lang, as well as imbuing the film with a similar sense of fatalism, dread and destiny that the American films noir of the 1940s had done. But so too does it underscore one of Rumblefish's central themes, that of the unreliability of time. Again, this will prove to be a motif explored in Coppola's later films, such as Jack, Youth Without Youth and Twixt, but here it finds its most elegant expression, assisted by police drummer Stuart Copeland's percussive score and time-lapse photography inspired by Godfrey Reggio's Koyaanisqatsi, which Zoetrope had produced 1 year earlier. Rumblefish is a film soaked in the iconography of mid-20th century America, but its strongest influence might perhaps be that of a French Algerian. The look of Mickey Rourke's Motorcycle Boy was based on philosopher Albert Camus, a visual homage which underlines the film's exploration of existential questions. As with Willard's journey upriver in Apocalypse Now, Rusty James's story is a metaphysical one, in which the shackles of society must be broken and the weight of the past lifted in order for him to become truly who he really is.